already, but I can see the numbers still continuing to go up, as has become a little bit of a tradition in webinars that I'm running. I like to give people just an extra couple of minutes to get themselves settled into something comfy, and I guess no more so than today, as we'll be sort of shooting the breeze and discussing some sort of broad topics. It's definitely one to be sitting there with a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, some form of drink to enjoy it along. Go and get yourself sorted. Numbers are still increasing. We'll give an extra couple of minutes and then we will get things started. Welcome to those who are just joining us. Still plenty of people arriving, so if you're arriving to silence and not quite sure what's going on, just giving it another little moment or two to allow the numbers to settle and for people to come in and get themselves organized before we start. We'll look to kick off in about another 60 seconds. Lots of people already introducing themselves, saying hi to this band and group here in the chat, so that might be something you look to do in the next couple of minutes and say hello to some other participants. See you in just a moment. Well, everyone, thank you very much for your patience in waiting and welcome to this webinar. It's a really interesting one for me. Normally, we are trying to give some elements of a link directly into filtering, monitoring, safeguarding, classroom management, or device management with a particular lens where Lightspeed has a solution that we work with schools to support. Today, not so much. This is a bit of a first for me. I said in a LinkedIn post earlier today, it's a chance for me to kind of get my geek on a little bit and get an opportunity to kind of talk shop and talk our industry and talk a little bit about Apple, a company that I love working with, love supporting with, love using in my personal life as well, and getting a chance to talk with like-minded individuals. There's another one here with me on the call. I'll introduce you to Rob in just a second, but I very much view this as a collaborative experience. There's already a plethora of comments with people joining us from all parts of the UK seem to be represented. I can see Mike from Denmark. Paul is in a rarely sunny Aberdeen. We've got people from Greenland and perhaps other places as well, and I'm not exactly sure. So we've got a broad plethora of people coming from a diverse range of backgrounds, but with one real focus, I guess. The purpose here is that we're all in the purpose of delivering education, delivering and supporting our students, and making them the most successful they can be with technology. And it's always been a very exciting time when we get to hear about the latest innovations that are coming out from Apple at their developer conference in June. We get some things in beta and we hear a lot of behind the scenes thing, but WWDC 2024 has not disappointed. There are quite a plethora of things for us to discuss. As I say, we're going to be discussing them in the comments, and as we talk through things, please help steer the chat. It's directly over here for me, so I'll be keeping a close eye and weaving your comments in as we go through. But I guess my primary companion and buddy here for me to talk against is Rob. Rob, thank you so much for getting up relatively early, not super early, but getting yourself all presentation ready and being able to hop on the webinar with you. It's fantastic to have you here.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion. This should be fun.
Should be a good one. Rob and I, both have a pedigree and a background that we've came from directly working in school education, school-based education, a school district for Rob in the US, and a local authority in Scotland here for me, both using Apple. Rob has, been with Lightspeed for the longest ever time, working on all of our product innovations, oversees all of our product work, and knows Apple from a technology perspective inside and out. And I guess you're less of a closet geek than I am, Rob, a little bit more. You're happy to own that badge, and you know where you're lying, that you
yeah, I can't hide it. So it's been part of what I've done for too long. So
well, I dress it up, as you say, a little bit more behind a fancy sport coat, certainly in this particular image. But that experience in Midlothian and the local authority, see me working with sort of 3,000-4,000 Apple devices on a day-to-day basis, and I already mentioned my penchant for them in my personal life, I should say. My responsibilities now are not linked necessarily directly to our product, but more about where the rubber meets the road and where our products are working directly with you as Lightspeed's customers. And I'm looking after all of our markets outside of North America. So we've got a real plethora of people to discuss these aspects and comes together. And hopefully you can see the synergies. But just before we kick off with some of the announcements, I wanted to just absolutely make them really clear that Lightspeed as a company and what we're trying to do with our products, what we're trying to do to support education, all ties back to our company's mission. We're wanting to make sure that the school communities that we serve and we support have a safe, secure, and equitable education experience. For us, that's largely around their digital experiences, and obviously it is today, and that ties directly into the solutions that we have. I rhymed them off at the very, very beginning that we're known for content filtering, for safeguarding, for delivering a classroom management solution to allow teachers to see screens and make support that classroom interaction. We have a device management solution supporting Apple devices in the classroom. And of course, we have a digital insight tool giving data analytics and how all of those pieces of technology and pieces of software are actually being used. Apple is a really important platform for us, but of course we support Windows, Chrome, as well as macOS and the iOS, iPadOS ecosystems with what we're doing. So naturally we're interested in hearing about what comes out. Rob, I'm going to flick to the next slide and move us really into the WWDC challenge, but and information. I guess the first biggest challenge that we're going to come across, and it was held back in Apple's keynote, certainly at WWDC, but is the one thing that everyone seems to be talking about from it. It's the one thing that most people are talking about in education, full stop. And it is that idea of generative language models, the use of AI in technology. Apple's flavor, they're rebranding very cleverly to be Apple Intelligence rather than artificial. And we'll get to some of those changes in a moment, some of the things you see on the screen. But I just wondered, I know that we spend a bit of time in talking about it in some of our products and in some of the features that we deliver. I'm assuming from a product development standpoint and how we actually use it, that we're leveraging parts of artificial intelligence to really help us do what we're trying to do as a company.
We are, absolutely. And, I think you mentioned this. I mean, this is the thing that everybody's talking about everywhere. Every event I go to, every webinar, this is really a central topic today. It's something we spend a lot of time talking about in various different ways. We're looking at how do we use AI across all aspects of our company? How do we make it more efficient, for employees internally to stay up to date on documentation and get information to help support our customers? We're looking at it on the engineering side to, how do you leverage the tools that are now out there to, help you do some of the kind of more mundane coding and how does that play into our process? And then also, we're looking at where does it play in our product? I mean, we have the kind of little lightweight things we've done. One, have the categorization in the filter so that schools can be aware of how it's being used, and the enhancement in classroom to inform teachers. But we're talking about so many more ideas beyond that, and how do we integrate it in? We're all starting to use it more and more. I think I do very little writing these days that I don't run through ChatGPT and just get some recommendations. What do you think of this? How do you rework it? Saves me having to go to my wife and ask her to review my writing. So I appreciate that. And then how do we help schools manage it? It is something from a product perspective and a product engineering we're just talking about constantly. How do we use it? How do we leverage it? How do we make our products better? But then how do we empower schools to use it effectively? It's not going away. We've been through similar kind of leaps in technology and how it impacts education. I think back to even like when YouTube started to come out and everybody's like, oh, we got to block it, be afraid of it. And now YouTube is a natural part of so many education processes. We're seeing the same thing with AI at a much faster pace, right? It went from, okay, immediately block it because we don't know what to do, to in a very short time, like, okay, now how do we integrate this in? How do we get our policies in place and all of that? So it's exciting. And it's incredibly useful, but you have to do it right. And I think that's when we look at, how do we partner with schools to just ensure that, we're providing the features that enable them to use them properly in education, and educate your students on what proper use of AI is. I'm probably rambling here, but the other thing that, that we were just talking about the other day, like a new thing in work, like maybe even a new job is prompt engineer, somebody who learns how to prompt the AI to get the best responses back. At least a skill that people are having to learn in their jobs, but there's even talk that might be a job someday. And that's crazy how far we've come in just a short time with this technology.
It is crazy, and I think it is only going to continue. There's no doubt about that. I think there's a real signal of intent with Apple Intelligence and the way it's truly baked into the operating system. A lot of the sort of school leaders I've been able to talk to, yeah, they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to make their decisions, but I don't know if it's helpful or not, but the reality is that AI and the models have been over here, slightly at the side. It's been easier. It has been possible to say block it or to choose when it was the appropriate time. But you look at some of the features that Apple Intelligence talking about, like the rewriting tools that are going to be built into core aspects of the system. Anytime that there's a text box being generated, to being able to, to ask for those proof writings, or the rewrite in a different tone, or some of the image things that you're seeing on screen as well, about the ability to create images on the fly baked into the operating system. It's not something that people are going to have a choice as to whether they're going to adopt or not. And I guess that steamroller, as you say, is something we've seen a few times in education in the past, and it's about generally getting on board with it and making sure we're harnessing it as a force for good.
Exactly.
Well, let's pivot from force for good to a lot of the focus that Apple put on Apple Intelligence was, their approach of trying to do things for good and around privacy and how Apple are trying to do that. And I really laud what they're doing. I think it's important to get my statement out there. I think the idea that it is a really private thing, that Apple are looking after your data or the data of your students, if this is deployed to the iPad that might be in their hands. It's really, really important that we do look after student data and keep it safe. But from a technology standpoint, I know that it is something that we struggle with sometimes across the platform. In education in the US and in the UK in particular, we have legislation that means we need that clear visibility across the devices. And I think it's an interesting world we're in, Rob, whenever so much of that is going to be kept very close between the user, our student, and Apple, and just how we potentially try and marry that up against against what we're trying to do for safeguarding. I'm not sure if there's a solution. There probably isn't right now. We need to find that one out together. But I wondered if you had any thoughts on just how those sort of things sit together.
Yeah, I think, certainly, Apple has done a tremendous amount to drive privacy across their devices, and I'm an Apple device user myself, and that is important. But yeah, there is that challenge and that balance when it comes to using them in education. Like everybody else, I think, we don't get any special preview. We get to see it at WWDC, and then it becomes a lot of investigation time, which is what our teams are working on right now. I will say Apple historically has done a very good job with recognizing a managed device when it's in that supervised mode and giving extra details and extra things that education environments can do in order to stay compliant. My expectation is we're going to see much of the same from that. But right now we're just starting to play with it. We're getting the beta releases on our devices and starting to see what we can learn, as quickly as possible, and how to get those into our products, so that we can empower our schools to do those things. But I think, it is that kind of supervised, managed device where that hard line is drawn, where Apple says, okay, if it's in this mode, now, we do open up more things to schools. And like I said, they've been a great partner for us with that. And they continue to be. That is probably not to this level, but when Apple has introduced other significant features in the past, this kind of time between the announcement and when the operating systems fully ship is a time when we traditionally will work with Apple and go, hey, we're seeing this on our supervised devices, and this might need some tweaking, and we give them that feedback. We certainly don't drive their roadmap, but they do. We get a sense they listen, and we've seen changes like that in the past. With Apple Intelligence, I would expect a similar experience as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's that dialogue, comes from Apple wanting to make sure that they're supporting all markets and engaging. We are one of a plethora of partners, but as I say, a valued one, or certainly I feel valued by Apple in the relationship that we have, and I'm sure you see a lot more of it from that product engagement side as well. And then that listening is super important. And you mentioned about the supervised devices and that those elevated levels for managed device and what we're able to do on there. I'm sure I want to talk to you in a minute when we talk about a different device about sort of the web filtering sites. I know that's something that's coming to. Well, let's move on. Let's move directly to there. It's coming to the Vision Pro.
It is.
Amongst a whole range of other things. We're going to get it properly into MDM via automatic device enrollment, which is going to be able to have those functions and APIs available to make that happen, and linking it directly into Apple School Manager. I know we had that in Vision OS 1.1, but certainly polishing around the edges of there. But the addition of further configurations and payloads to include web content filter is one of those enterprise features you were just kind of discussing, I feel. And I know we use it on iPad to make sure we're reviewing and seeing what's happening across that device's web traffic. All of this feels for me as if they're really gearing up for what is the future of the Vision Pro and what is the future of this particular spatial computing model. I would say that although there's nothing publicly from Apple, they must see a position where this is coming more into the enterprise world, more into the school world. What's your thoughts on that? Is this something we're going to see in classrooms anytime soon?
I think so. And I think you're spot on. The introduction of the web content filter payload is, I think, very key to recognizing that strategy with Apple. And so actually, Apple gave me an excuse to finally buy one. So I ordered mine yesterday. And we need to start to take a look at what this looks like. But the filtering, to me, in a device like this, if you think of it in a enterprise environment, it's at least for today probably going to be a controlled special use kind of environment for a tool like this in an enterprise. In schools, there's certainly I've watched the demos. I played with one that a friend had. There's certainly the kind of exciting things you could do with education, but to me, that introduction of the web filter payload says they're serious about driving this as an education device. And so, yeah, like I said, I've got mine on order. I'm going to start to figure it out. We're certainly going to be looking at, what that means and how do we integrate in from that regard. But, we did our district advisory group or school advisory group so a few months ago. And, a significant number of customers attending that event were talking about starting to buy small labs of these. Maybe that lab was even 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 devices to start. But it is something that education is definitely starting to look at. I think it's going to grow. And I think, again, for me, the web filter payload tells me Apple is driving this as an education device. And I think that's great. I'm excited about it and looking forward to, what we can do to work with schools to make sure these devices are used to their maximum potential, but used safely.
I think you're right. It's a hat tip in that direction, certainly around that availability. And really the idea of being able to filter on that device where there's so much visual content, bandwidth being huge. If you don't use that web content filter payload to try and do that processing on device like we do across iPad to make those decisions there, that's a lot of latency. So I'm glad they've taken that approach. They're keeping it consistent across their interface. Last hurdle for me, I think, on this one, the Vision OS 2 will introduce this guest mode so that it's going to remember the last user who wasn't the principal user. That makes sense. It can remember one other guest user and what their facial retinal scans were to be able to do that quick swap bit. I think when they innovate in that space, we'll start to see those labs really maybe a true viable option in taking on. But, here's hoping 2.1 or some form of version of the software, they figure that one out so we can have that experience where it's a little bit more, well, plug and play isn't the right phrase, but it's a little bit just throw it on and get started for the students.
Exactly.
I guess. And I guess, there'll be a lot of apprehensive teachers who wanted to do anything in bulk with $3,000 or $4,000 of headset on their students' heads. They would be a little bit apprehensive about that. And Rob, I'm not sure if you can see the comments, but it is now absolutely full of UK schools and UK customers who are saying that it's definitely not fair that the product team in the US get to explore Vision OS, and it's very important that the go-to-market teams in the UK have got access to a Vision Pro so that we can be doing. Is that working? I'm not sure.
I'll make sure I take that comment forward.
That would be good. Thanks for that. Thank you. I'm very excited about what that is. I mean, you look at what iPhone did for the sort of smartphone market and what came after it. I'm very excited about spatial computing in the classroom in general. Maybe Apple have paved the way, or they're really sort of pointing a clear direction. History tells us that other manufacturers will follow in a similar direction, perhaps at a more cost affordable model, perhaps in a model that looks slightly different. But generally speaking, it's going to drive that adoption across the industry, whether it's Vision Pro or whether it's a competitor, and we'll see so much more. I think of some of the earliest experiences of Google Cardboard and throwing my students on virtual field trips through that sort of that program that Google sponsored that seen trips out to primary schools near me. We've come a long way already, so it's exciting to see where it's going to go, I guess.
It has, yeah. I'd forgotten about Google Cardboard. That was a fun.
Pretty cool. Nice to throw it in. Yeah. All of their work, by the way, ended up in the Arts and Culture app from Google, as opposed to being a separate bit. So it is still there, even if the program itself had to bid farewell. Yeah. Anyway, we move swiftly on. Swiftly on? No, that a terrible dad joke? I thought I had to put that in there. I had to get it in at least once. Folks, we've covered off some of the hardware stuff. We're going to look a little bit more into software and talk about it. We've seen some comments and things starting to come in. I'm going to come back, Simon, and talk about shared iPad. Please feel free to share your comments. I know I'm not directly asking them and stopping, but hit those keyboards hard and get those popped in and seeing what you're looking at. Next, we're going to focus on just some of the updates, which I guess are pretty exciting for the ecosystem when you're deep and hard into it, and are really pretty interesting from the classroom perspective, really showing a sign of maturity, I think. You're seeing here a screenshot from the Schoolwork app with a new assessment mode and new abilities to create assessments. I'm not saying this used to be hard, but the ability now to be able to import these, import an assessment from a PDF or from using the camera to take a picture of a physical screen and turn it into an assessment that's easy to deliver via Schoolwork feels like an Apple innovation to me. Rob, I've taught one-to-one in a couple of Google Classroom schools and a couple of Teams schools, and you're taking that closed procedure for English literature or with the blanks to fill in and reconverting it into a digital piece of work. I quickly worked out that Google Drive had OCR scanning, and that made it a little bit faster. But this feels as if it's going to be a big lift for those who are using this and pulling those assessments together.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think this just kind of really shows Apple's ongoing commitment to education and recognizing that these devices have different needs in an education environment, and making sure that they are providing the functions and the capabilities to really drive that. And I think it's exciting. Again, it kind of ties back to that same thing with the Apple Vision Pro and the web filter. To me, these are more of Apple's ongoing commitment to education. No device is perfect, but they're going to continue to drive them forward in ways that make them simpler and easier for people to use. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other side, I should have said it, Flick, I've got the screenshot ready to pull it to give the visual, but you create the assessments, but even be able to grade these, to mark them and put them together on a question by question basis, again, feels like a really more mature set of functionality that we're seeing inside Schoolwork. One of the challenges I've heard from schools why they've maybe not went down the Schoolwork route and the class, in that sort of approach. Likewise with Apple Classroom, and I think tying back to Simon's comment even around shared iPad, there is something about that workflow, and there's something about managed Apple IDs and the availability of what they're doing and how things are growing in Apple School Manager. I guess Apple School Manager is another area that we've seen a lot of updates come to. Lots of them over the years, a few just now, but they're making it increasingly easy now to be able to fully roster and get your users in here to be able to get the managed Apple IDs that are created. I know whenever I did that in my previous role, we had a lot of people that already created a personal Apple ID with their work email address. So really nice, quality of life improvements to be able to merge those now and to restrict them. So merging them was something you could never do before. They had to just repopulate them. Now we can get them properly into that managed ecosystem. And likewise, we can truly stop them from registering any more non-managed Apple IDs with their email address. So that's going to be a big saver. I know, Rob, whenever we come to talk with a new customer, well, let's say, we talk MDM, or even we're talking filtering and or alerting across iPad. We always need to be able to correspond the user and want to map that user to the device, and we want to understand the username. And we can do that via MDM, but we often find that people haven't got Apple School Manager in a good spot from a rostering perspective. And it's something that's really tricky. We, in the UK, haven't spent quite so much time on the one roster format. It's something that we don't hear a lot about. I probably hear a lot more about it because I'm more connected to you guys and the school districts in the States who've long since needed this standardized format. I wonder, could you give the viewers a 30 seconds on one roster and why it's helping to standardize and how it's supported across, well, it's in Microsoft School Data Sync. It's supporting ultimately getting users into Apple School Manager alongside what we do on the Lightspeed platform side too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that, and I've been at Lightspeed for a while and out of a day-to-day school environment, but this was a challenge that we were trying to figure out back then, and has continued to always be an issue. And one roster has been certainly a huge step in the right direction, a huge improvement. Because everybody's talking the same language. Basically, we're using the same data structure, the same fields, the same breakdown, the same files, and that kind of thing. So that really has simplified it. And all of the kind of major student record systems in the U.S. are supporting that now. But even when I was over at BET in late January, February, I can't remember exactly when those dates were, but I was talking to both a number of others in the Edtech space and customers there, that I think that expansion is starting to grow internationally. We're starting to see one roster support in the systems that are being used internationally, and I think that's great because it does give us all a way to transfer this data as needed in a standardized format. Now, there's always going to be unique things you work with any kind of student record, transport one. You want to keep it safe and secure and all that. And one roster's got a lot of that built in, especially to their API connections and that as well. But yeah, I think it is growing. It has simplified the landscape for us here in the States. And I was, quite pleased to hear when I was over in London to hear that it is starting to grow internationally. And I think it will continue to drive that EdTech interoperability because, when we're all talking the same language, it's a lot easier for us to share data, which empowers schools. When you have that data and you can pull those together from multiple sources and everybody's kind of using the same source of truth for identity, it really simplifies a lot of what we have to do.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's definitely growing over here. I mean, I noticed Paul from Aberdeen was on. I know it's something that they're looking at, and I know there's another couple that are definitely using and implementing it, either in the CSV function where we're uploading student data, or actually the more manageable way using the API and things. It's a really interesting standard. If you're not familiar with it, I would definitely recommend having a quick look it up to see exactly what's there. But we often have found in the past that it's not been needed for some of our say for filtering in our product scenario, Rob, because you get enough groups from the organizational units that you can pull from Google or Microsoft. But it's when we get into the classroom management side and when you need tools like Apple School Manager that need to be able to understand and power Apple's version of classroom management, that's my segue into that one. You need to get that data and that pulled across. On Classroom, not a whole load new coming into there. There's a nice function which I think is pretty cool. The ability for teachers to create an ad hoc class. So just it's not something that's been managed by Apple School Manager, that they're able to just quickly throw a class together for the students that we do. And I know, Rob, that's something that we do in our own classroom management tool, which doesn't obviously, we don't get the full same access that Apple Classroom can do across iPad, but when we're looking on Windows, Chrome, and Mac OS to be able to give some of that parity. Teachers have long since been asking us, and delighted that we can support it, being able to give them that quick ad hoc class.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's so many use cases for that, whether it is, a special study group that a teacher might be working with, or a student that has, moved over to their class temporarily. I mean, there's just so many things that occur outside the normal schedule. It's kind of a bigger topic, but we talk about, across our products sometimes, like, well, wouldn't this be easier if we just got the bell schedule and we just did everything off the bell schedule? And what we find is, yeah, that's great, but there are so many variations to that bell schedule on any given day. So many things that teachers are having to adjust to on the fly. And so that ad hoc class management, whether it's adding students or managing the class, is really key, because you can't predict what's going to happen in a school on any given day.
You can't, and I guess it would be lovely, wouldn't it, that if every lesson followed the lesson plan, and if every student learned the learning intention and what they were intending to learn in that lesson, and everyone was exactly the same, lined up in the scenario that we've got there. It would be wonderful, wouldn't it? But that is not the reality of messy education, and this is a nice functionality that helps us to get there. The next one is pretty big. I think it's solving something that is messy today. But I am going to caveat it with a little bit of the kind of the warning that we're delving into even more technical realms here. I don't know if you've noticed, but we started very high and broad, and we're slowly getting more specific as we go down into the content. But we're delving into device management, really. As we want to look at something called declarative management, which has been around for a couple of years, absolutely. But didn't get a lot of airtime, I guess, this year necessarily, Rob, but those in the know read between some of the lines to think about exactly what it means. I gave an analogy yesterday about what declarative is which you said was not too bad. Can you beat that? Do you have a better stab at describing declarative than?
I don't. I actually loved yours. I think I'm going to let you do that.
Okay.
Yeah. You did a great job. Yeah.
So let me break it down. Before we talk declarative, which is the new way for devices to talk to the MDM, let me explain the old way. So, the old APIs, the MDM would send a command to the device, which would say, hey, please update this app, or please update your system software. And the way it was written, the device had the ability to reply and say, sorry, I'm too busy, or I'm not switched on, or I don't have connection, or something along those lines. And it was ultimately like, yeah, call back later, try again. And that's why we have times when you're using an MDM to manage your devices that you can click that update button and nothing happens, because you've sent the command from the MDM and the MDM tool has done its piece, but it's not been fully received. Declarative changes the story, acts a little bit more like a voicemail. So you're able to send that command once. The device will reply and say, I've heard you, I've got your message. Maybe I can't do it right now, but I'm sure going to get right on that as soon as I can. And putting that in there, I think, is something that's really going to change the story and really strengthen that connection and sort out that mess that was between MDM and the device. Now, it's not new. Declarative isn't brand new. It's been around for a couple of years, and certain functions of MDM tools will already be working in a declarative style as opposed to the old style, and operating in a hybrid. But we believe that's certainly going to change. Rob, is that right?
Yeah, it looks like from the information, and we're still digging in and following up, and again doing our testing, as I mentioned earlier. But it does look like Apple is moving all of the newer type devices, both for iOS and Mac OS, into a declarative only world, right? Which is good. I mean, like you said, I mean the I'll take your example even a step further. We would have to, we'd send that command, and then we'd have to check back, like, did you do it? Please do this. And is this done, constantly? With declarative, again, not only does it say, yes, I've got it, but then we know when it's done too. So it saves a lot of back and forth between the devices. That makes the MDM more powerful to know the state of those devices. And so all of that is a significant improvement. So yeah, the newer devices look like they are going to require declarative, which I think is good. It's going to make management faster, easier, more clear to the admins, kind of the state of the devices as everything moves that direction.
I think, as you say, been around for a couple of times, but this definitely sounds like the year it's going to shine. We've maybe been prepped for that, and I appreciate on the call today, there's definitely going to be quite a few of our MDM customers who are here pulling through. I wanted to just spend the smallest fraction of our time on the webinar today just on that, and I guess make some commitments. The first one that Rob and the team have been working behind the scenes on for quite a while now, building all of these policies and restructuring everything that you've seen in Lightspeed to make it support all of these declarative commands. And certainly we're working on making sure that full, as in all of the commands that we have, that will be ready in time for the operating systems to be deployed. 0-day coverage whenever they're released in September, October time, when the operating systems are pushed out and released. Alongside that, there's some other features that we're bringing very, very soon into MDM. Return to service, Rob, is another massive time saver and win for school IT admins.
Yeah, we talk to a lot of schools that, you take those iPads, maybe you're using for a certain age of student, and, they age out of that, and now you need to prep them for the next batch coming in. MDM could do a couple of things very nicely previously, in that it could, can issue the wipe command, so you could, remotely tell all those devices to wipe. And then through Apple School Manager and MDM integration, as the device powers back up, it would auto join the MDM and provision it and do all of that. There was just one piece in between that really would slow things down, that would require IT to have to touch those devices. And that was to join the Wi-Fi. And we talked to schools that did all kinds of tricks about, well, I spin up this, open access, no password Wi-Fi during this time to make it easier and faster and that kind of thing. But it still was a challenge, right? Somebody had to get it on the Wi-Fi, and then it would take over and do all the rest of the work. So with return to service, when you issue that wipe command, you also include the information about the Wi-Fi network that device should use. And so now when it does the full wipe, it keeps that Wi-Fi information and will rejoin and then go automatically into its process. So you can actually, now fully wipe these devices and let the end user do the out of boxing. I know it's not brand new, so it's not really out of boxing, but that process, right? They can now take it in the end user, powered on. It'll auto join the Wi-Fi. It'll use your MDM rules and your Apple School Manager rules to enroll in the MDM, do the, skip whichever screens you want, do that kind of stuff, auto provision, and away they go. So it's a huge time saver for IT, and one we're very excited about.
Very much so. I mean, there's one thing doing that once, or doing it, when it first is open, as you say, out of box, new student, zero touch enrollment, and we all supported with our MDM and others, I guess, too. It's a really wonderful experience for the student, but the reality comes at the end of the school year where we need to roll these devices over. They're maybe changing buildings, changing schools, and we really don't want to be spending time in the last few weeks of a school year or the first few swapping everything over. So to have this all automated, massive change. Yes. But speaking of massive change for me, you see it in the screenshot, but we're giving the UI a good lick of paint, making it even easier and more intuitive to pull this together. And these say what we're working on is a clear commitment that we're on final touches, let's put it that way. Across the summer, we should see more of these aspects coming out to Lightspeed's MDM tool.
Yep, absolutely. There's, as Colin mentioned, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes, kind of getting everything in place for these new features that we knew were coming from Apple, and getting all that prepped, and now we're starting to be able to roll forward with these new features. So it's exciting.
Absolutely, sure is. I do have one more thing to talk about in true Apple style. I've left maybe the best to last, but I'm going to even leave it hanging even longer because I want to just push a slight pause on what this regularly scheduled programming, and throw a bit of a curveball in. We've got comments, and thank you to those people who've contributed. Just before we finish and talk and round out on our very last functions, I want to come back to Harry, who's really keen, and we've got iPads from a filtering perspective, Rob, here, where they're in that sort of cart scenario. They're a shared device, not necessarily shared iPad, although shared iPad is increasingly a thing. And we got a nice new feature bump for that, for shared iPad in WWDC this year, where teachers are now going to be able to sign in students as well, without the student having to go and click their name on the launch page. But Harry was talking about best practice around creating sort of fake accounts. That's something we see quite a lot. I feel where we have iPad 5 or Yellow Cart 2 or whatever. That's my imperative is exactly sort of best practice to see. Is that shared in from your experience across our US customers as well, Rob, and we'll get that global experience?
Yeah, I think that that method works and continues to work. I think that as Apple has continued to make improvements with the managed Apple IDs and the Apple School Manager piece, and that drives into shared iPad with things like you're saying with the sign-on changes they made or they're making this year. I think the more and more you can drive to that kind of true shared iPad model, gives you more flexibility and allows you to then I'll speak a little bit about our filter, but when you're using our filter along with that, the filtering policy and identity is tied to that logged in user on the device. And so it does give you a little more power and flexibility off of that kind of standardized, this device named model. Yeah. So I think, and there's been, changes to that program over the years. And like you said, the change to allow a teacher to sign in those students more, especially if you think of the younger students that might struggle with that a little bit, the teacher can now do that sign in for them. I think that will help drive that forward and allow you to start to move towards those managed IDs instead of that standard, stock ID for that device.
I think it's just been viewed, certainly by the schools I've talked to, that it's like a bridge too far. I mean, in terms of manual import of users, then device requirements to get to shared iPad, then what is that looking from a caching perspective, and then keeping up all those users up to date. That's quite a lot of hurdles. But as I say, we're starting to see a lot of those being knocked down with better, clearer rostering into Apple School Manager, easier signing in, whereas a teacher can help those little learners to do that even faster. To the idea that the API is updating the users and keeping things moving, even more modern advancements in Wi-Fi and the ability for the iCloud data to transmit faster between devices, I think sees a much greater place for shared iPad. I guess, Harry, you followed up there saying it is about the safeguarding part, and you're right. Whenever you like to have as many things in your control as you possibly can, and if we get the shared iPad model, we get reporting tied directly to that student user. Where we don't, we're relying on the teacher themselves. We do see some good sign-in sheet options where a student needs to come and sign their name against an iPad and sign in and out. Or I've seen a really cool one where the side of the trolley cart was basically a whiteboard. So the student had to come and record their name, and the teacher took a picture of the whiteboard once the lesson was started, so they were able to see there. But I certainly get where you're coming from with trust issues. Tricky one. It's a tricky one, and it's that balance, isn't it, between what we're doing and the privacy of how all that ties together.
Yeah, but I do think, we talked earlier about one roster that helps, as there's more and more standardization across that helps in that regard. Apple's obviously driving with changes they're making to the devices. And I think, a few years ago, you would have a mix of devices that some wouldn't support it, but all the modern iPads all support it. So it's getting better. And I think it does give some options once your environment kind of has those pieces in place.
Completely agree. And definitely backing up Simon's comment there that, it's not just, I guess you're completely right to call it. It's not just about attributing the device to the user, but it's what does the user do on that device? And the fact that a shared iPad session concludes and you can finish, and any saved Google accounts, staff members' accounts, etc., all wipes is a massive benefit to shared iPad. And it's certainly increasingly, I feel it's the juice is worth the squeeze in making sure that is established and set up correctly within your school, within your organization. Rob, have I left one more thing on the screen long enough to build enough anticipation of the final feature? The final thing that I think even Apple were kind of poking fun a little bit in the main keynote, but this got a lot of airtime, and I think it's worthy of it. Of course, it couldn't be anything other than the calculator app, which long since been absent on iPad, but in testament to Apple, it's never just okay, we converted the iPhone app and made it a calculator. I mean, anyone could do that. I thought this was really cool. I'm not a math teacher. I know I was primary trained, so basic algebra and sort of Scottish second level is kind of where I kind of maxed out a little bit. But seeing some of the demos, being able to visualize more of these graphing aspects is something that I know a lot of schools leverage third-party software for. And suddenly you've got this manipulative changing thing built in across the operating system as part of the calculator, built into the Notes app, built into all sorts of places. From a learning and teaching perspective, from those teachers who will really know how to push the right buttons and make the right things, this is going to be really powerful for their students.
Yeah, it's a nice change, and as you said, they didn't just bring a calculator; they really expanded it to what I think is going to be a very useful tool in the iPad.
Very much so, and it is saying it is sort of available across the system, but in that assessment mode that I mentioned earlier, which by the way you're now able to use third-party and additional tools. You're not just using the Apple's assessment mode to lock them into one application for an assessment. You're now able to leverage, do you want to give them access to a web browser or another additional resource? One of those resources is of course going to be the calculator, but they've even built various commands that you'll be able to leverage, so you can restrict it just to say basic calculator functions and hide some of the other aspects too. So they've really thought and done what Apple probably does best, and probably has been a bit of a theme as we've kind of talked around an awful lot of the aspects of WWDC. It's a case of looking at what's been there, listening to a bunch of people, thinking 100 different ways to do it, and then ultimately choosing the path that just seems to make sense. I guess I can say that as someone who's drank the Apple Kool-Aid. It makes sense to me. I know, Rob, Lightspeed used to have a slogan of, it just works, or make IT work, and sort of leveraging the simplicity of our things. I think there's certainly some synergies that I love about Lightspeed to match against the Apple philosophy of let's do it the hard way and the right way, so that it's the easy way for students and pulls it through, I guess. You've been a great companion and a great sounding board as I've been able to get my geek on and to structure things through the webinar. You've been a great audience as well, and a great crew in the comments. If you ever want to follow up on anything you've heard, please feel free to be able to pull through. I guess, Harry's, I'm going to round out with another question for you, the last one that's coming in. ETA on declarative in Lightspeed, MDM. Some bits of it are already there. You didn't.
Yes.
You don't necessarily know that you're realizing you're using it, but that commitment is there. That by the release of the operating systems, iOS 18, macOS Sequoia, we will be fully supporting declarative style tools.
Yes.
Rob, is that going to be visible in any way? Is there a way for us to make it, clear in, that this is a declarative command? Really, that's a real curveball I've thrown you right at the end.
Yeah, I don't. It's kind of a back end process for us, right?
It
Because
is, yeah.
we have devices that we're going to have a variety of things that we're supporting. We have some devices that are not, that are actually older, not running an OS that supports declarative. You'll have kind of like the current iOS 17, right? Is that what we're on?
Yeah.
That does the hybrid. Some things can be legacy deployment, some can be declarative, and then declarative on the newer stuff. So to us, it's all a back end process. You don't have to worry about it. We are going to, we do. This is the way it works. It recognizes the device and that device capabilities, and then delivers the payload in the proper way. So we do have a little more work to kind of go that full declarative mode, but we will have that ready by the time those operating systems ship. But yes, it's definitely something a priority. We've built it in such a way to make it so you don't have to worry about it, and it is a behind the scenes kind of feature.
And as I say, by the time we reach October, November, and everything's fully there with those newer devices, there's only going to be one option really for those anyway, and it'll be that declarative style. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like I'm looking forward to a lot of things and a lot of other things across the products. You'll be able to hear from Lightspeed across the summer. We've got a lot more to be able to share. It's been a pleasure chatting. Again, thank you so much. You will all receive a recording. If you want to share it with anyone else, feel free also to reach back out to Rob or myself. Find a way if you want to keep some of the conversations going. Always happy to hear from customers and to discuss, how we can make an even stronger fit for our products at time. But thank you for joining us, and hope you have a really good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks,